The candlelight flickered through the crack in the door. She pressed her palm against the wood, breath held, heart hammering against her ribs. The ballroom beyond was a sea of silk and laughter, but she was not part of it. She was not supposed to be here. She had come looking for him, the Duke of Ashworth, the man who had whispered promises into her skin in the darkness of his study, who had traced her spine with reverent fingers and called her his alone. She had come to tell him the news that would change everything, the life growing inside her, his heir, their secret. But she found him first, surrounded by his peers, a glass of brandy in his hand, that cold, aristocratic mask firmly in place. And she heard him speak. "You speak of Lady Catherine?" A cruel laugh. "She is a passing amusement, a servant's warmth on a winter night. Nothing more. She could never be my Duchess." The words didn't hit her like a blow. They hit her like a blade that had been sharpened for months, years. The entire time she had given him her body, her trust, her future. She had been nothing but a convenience, a warm body in the dark, a secret he could discard when daylight came. Her hand dropped from the door. The laughter from the ballroom swelled around her, but it sounded distant, underwater. She could feel the blood draining from her face, the cold settling into her bones. The child she carried, his child, suddenly felt like a weight, a chain, a sentence. And in that moment, she made a decision that would alter the course of 3 lives. She would disappear, and he would never see her coming. Layer 2. The official story. The official story, whispered through the drawing rooms and tea tables of high society, was simple. Catherine was a servant, a lady's maid to the Duke's sister. She was beautiful, yes, dangerously so. Dark hair that caught the candlelight, eyes the color of winter storms, a mouth that could make a man forget his own name. But she was beneath him. Everyone knew that. The Duke of Ashworth was untouchable. His family line stretched back centuries. His fortune could buy kingdoms. His name opened every door in Europe. He was engaged to Lady Eleanor Blackwood, the daughter of a marquis, a woman whose bloodline was as blue as the veins in her porcelain wrists. Their engagement had been announced at the beginning of the season. The Ton had celebrated. It was a perfect match, wealth meeting wealth, title meeting title, ambition meeting ambition. And Catherine? Catherine was a footnote, a rumor, a scandal that never quite erupted because no one wanted to believe it. The servants whispered. The maids exchanged glances when the Duke's private chambers were visited in the dead of night. The butler pretended not to see. But no one spoke, because the Duke's reputation was iron, and anyone who dared dent it would be crushed. So Catherine remained invisible, a shadow in the halls, a name that appeared on no invitation, no guest list, no family portrait. The kingdom believed she was a mistake he had made and quickly forgotten. But the kingdom was wrong. And this is where the official story begins to crack. Layer 3, the first crack. The first crack appeared on the night of the engagement ball. Lady Eleanor Blackwood wore a gown of ivory silk that cascaded like moonlight. Diamonds glittered at her throat. She was the picture of aristocratic perfection, poised, polished, practiced. The Duke stood beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back, his smile carved from obligation. But Catherine saw what no one else saw. She saw his eyes. They flickered to the servants' entrance where she stood in her plain grey dress, carrying a tray of champagne flutes. They lingered. For a fraction of a second, his composure cracked. Something raw passed across his face. Regret, longing, fear. She saw him grip his glass tighter. She saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. She saw him look away first. The kingdom believed he had no feelings for her, but the kingdom did not see his hand tremble when her name was mentioned. The kingdom did not see the letter he drafted and burned every night over and over, never sending a single word. The kingdom did not see him stand at her doorway the night after the ball, his fist raised to knock, frozen for 10 full minutes before he turned and walked away. But here is what no one told her that night. He had been forced to choose. His father, the late Duke, had made him swear on his deathbed. Marry Eleanor, secure the alliance, Protect the family name. The servant girl must be forgotten. If you do not, I will destroy her. I will destroy her family. I will make sure she disappears in a way that cannot be undone." The Duke had agreed. What choice did he have? His father's dying words were a command, a threat, a sentence. He had chosen duty over love. He had chosen the family name over the woman who carried his heart in her hands, and she never knew. Layer 4. The Hidden Truth. The night before her disappearance, Catherine stood in her small attic room, staring at herself in the cracked mirror. Her reflection was pale. Her hands rested on her belly, where a life she had not planned for grew stronger every day. She had written him a letter, 3 pages. She had poured everything into it, the fear, the hope, the love she still carried despite his cruelty. She had told him about the child. She had asked him to choose. She had begged him to be the man she thought he was. But she never sent it. Because that morning she had seen the announcement in the society pages, the wedding date, the guest list, the description of Lady Eleanor's trousseau. The Duke of Ashworth and Lady Eleanor Blackwood would be married in St. George's Chapel at noon on the first Saturday of June. He had not just chosen Eleanor, he had made it official, he had made it public, he had made it irreversible. And Catherine realized something terrible. He had never intended to choose her. She had been a diversion, a secret, a sin he would confess to his priest and forget in the arms of his proper wife. She burned the letter, watched the flames consume her hopes, her fears, her unborn child's claim to a name that would never be theirs. Then she packed a single bag, her mother's locket, a change of clothes, the small savings she had hidden under the floorboards, and she walked out into the fog. The estate was silent. The servants were asleep, the gates were unguarded. She walked through them without looking back, her steps certain, her resolve cold as the autumn air. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she could not stay. And the Duke, the man who had called her a passing amusement, would not know she had left until the morning, and by then she would be gone, disappeared, a ghost. He would spend 7 years searching for what he threw away in one night. Layer 5. The Duke's Descent. The morning after she vanished, the Duke of Ashworth received the news with a face of stone. His valet informed him that Lady Catherine was not in her room. Her belongings were gone. A single note remained on her pillow. Not a letter, not an explanation, just 2 words, "Forgive me." He read them, folded the paper, placed it in his breast pocket without a word. He went to breakfast. He attended his meetings. He met with Lady Eleanor's father to discuss the wedding arrangements. He smiled. He shook hands. He performed the role of the Duke of Ashworth with impeccable precision. But that night, alone in his study, he shattered. He tore the room apart. Bookshelves overturned, papers scattered. The decanter of brandy smashed against the wall. He screamed until his throat bled. Then he screamed again. The servants huddled in the hallway, terrified to approach. He had done this. He had driven her away. He had called her a passing amusement in a room where anyone could hear. He had let his father's threat hold him captive. He had chosen obligation over the only woman who had ever made him feel alive. And now she was gone. He sent riders to every village within a day's travel. He sent letters to every estate, every port, every inn. He offered fortunes. He begged. He became the man the kingdom whispered about, the broken duke who lost his mind over a servant. He cancelled the wedding. Eleanor's father threatened legal action. The ton was scandalized. The Duke of Ashworth, the most eligible bachelor in England, had publicly humiliated his bride-to-be for a woman who had abandoned him. He did not care. He searched for months, years. He tore through the countryside, through the docks, through the slums of London. He followed rumors that led nowhere, chased ghosts that dissolved in daylight. And every night he wrote her a letter, hundreds of letters, thousands, addressed to Catherine in care of nowhere. He filled them with everything he had never said. The love he had been too afraid to speak, the promises he had been too weak to keep, the truth that he had never stopped thinking of her, even when his lips were pressed to Eleanor's hand. He never sent them. He could not. He did not know where to send them, so he locked them in a chest that grew heavier with every passing year, a chest that became a monument to his failure. The kingdom whispered that he was unhinged, that he had lost his mind to grief, that the cold, untouchable Duke had become a recluse, a shadow, a cautionary tale. But the kingdom did not know the half of it, because the Duke had not just lost Catherine, he had lost his heir, and he did not even know it. Layer 6, the core truth, the reunion, first half-time pivot. 7 years later, Catherine returned. She did not return to reclaim him. She did not return to exact revenge. She returned because her mother was dying, and the small cottage in the village at the edge of the Ashworth estate was the only home she had ever known. She was different now. The girl who had fled into the fog had been soft, hopeful, trusting. The woman who stepped down from the hired carriage was carved from stone. Her face was thinner, sharper. Her eyes had the look of someone who had seen the worst the world had to offer and survived it anyway. Yet the Duke's chest of unsent letters was not the only secret locked away. 7 years had passed, and he still didn't know a single word of the one truth that could shatter or save him. If you want to witness the moment the Duke finally learns what he lost, subscribe to follow this story as it unravels. Every letter, every lie, every heartbeat. And in the comments, tell me one thing. If you were Catherine, would you have told him the truth the moment you stepped off that carriage, or would you have let him rot in his ignorance? And beside her, a boy of 6. Dark hair, grey eyes, a stubborn tilt to his chin that was unmistakably his father's. His name was William. He had never known his father. He had never known the Duke of Ashworth existed. Catherine had told him his father was a sailor who had died at sea. It was a lie. But it was a kinder lie than the truth. She had built a life in a distant village far from the Ashworth estate. She had worked as a seamstress, a laundress, a governess. She had raised William alone, in a cramped room with a single window, teaching him to read by candlelight, telling him stories of a world he would never know. She had never remarried. She had never loved again. The Duke had broken something inside her that could not be repaired. But she had survived. She had built a life. She had raised a son. And now she was back. She did not plan to see him. She did not plan to confront him. She would visit her mother, say her goodbyes, and leave before anyone recognized her. But fate had other plans. On the second day of her return, she took William to the village market. She needed bread, milk, a new pair of boots for her growing son. She kept her head down, her shawl pulled tight, her eyes fixed on the cobblestones. And then she heard a voice. "Lady Catherine." She froze. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. It was the housekeeper from the Ashworth estate, a woman who had shown her kindness in those dark days. Catherine turned. The housekeeper's face went pale. Her eyes dropped to the boy, then widened. "My lady," the housekeeper whispered. "The Duke. He is in the village today. He visits every month, searching. He has never stopped." Catherine's blood turned to ice. She grabbed William's hand. "We need to leave. Now." But it was too late. A carriage had pulled up at the end of the street. The door opened, and a man stepped out, taller than she remembered, his hair streaked with grey, his face carved by grief into something harder, sadder, older. The Duke of Ashworth. He saw her, and the world stopped. The Duke's breath caught in his throat. For 7 years, he had searched. For 7 years he had chased rumors, followed ghosts, tormented himself with the belief that she was dead. And now she stood before him, alive, real, breathing. But she was not alone. Beside her stood a boy with dark hair, grey eyes, a stubborn chin, his eyes. The world tilted. He grabbed the carriage door to steady himself. "Who is that boy?" he whispered. But he already knew. Catherine did not answer. She pulled William closer, shielding him with her body. "You do not get to ask that question," she said. Her voice was ice. "You gave up that right 7 years ago." The Duke felt his heart crack open. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times. He had rehearsed every word, every apology, every plea. But now that she was here, he could not speak. The words were trapped behind the walls he had built, buried under years of guilt and shame. "Please," he finally managed. "Please. Let me explain." "You already explained," Catherine said. I heard you that night. You said I was a passing amusement. You said I could never be your Duchess. You said I was a coward. The words tore out of him. I was a coward, and I have spent every day since paying for it. The market had gone silent. Villagers had stopped to stare. The Duke of Ashworth, the untouchable aristocrat, was on his knees in the mud, begging. But Catherine did not soften. Your cowardice cost me everything, she said. My reputation, my home, my dignity. I raised your son alone, in poverty, in shame. You were not there. You will never be there. You are a stranger to him, and you will remain a stranger. She turned. She took William's hand. And she walked away. The Duke stayed on his knees, watching her disappear into the crowd. He had found her, but he had lost her again. And this time, he knew he would never forgive himself. Layer 7. Emotional closure. First pass end. That night, Catherine sat in her mother's cottage, watching William sleep. His face was peaceful, innocent. He did not know that the man he had seen in the market was his father. He did not know that his entire life was a lie. She wanted to keep it that way. She wanted to protect him from the Duke's world, a world of cold, grand estates, cruel whispers, and a father who had chosen duty over love. But a knock at the door shattered her resolve. She opened it. The Duke stood in the rain, soaked through, his eyes red-rimmed. He was not wearing his fine coat. He was not carrying his title like a shield. He was just a man, broken, desperate. I will not beg, he said. I have already done that. I will not grovel. I have already done that too. She said nothing. I came to tell you the truth, he continued. The truth I should have told you 7 years ago. My father forced me to choose. He threatened to destroy you if I did not marry Eleanor. I chose duty. I chose the family name. I chose everything except the only thing that mattered. Her hand tightened on the doorframe. I have spent every day of the last 7 years regretting it, he said. I have not married. I have not moved on. I have searched for you in every corner of this country. I have written you letters I never sent. I have built a monument of my own failure. Your monument does not help me, Catherine said. Your regret does not feed my son. Your pain does not erase mine. I know. His voice cracked. I know it does not. I will never make it right, but I will spend the rest of my life trying. She looked at him. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to slam the door and never see his face again. But she saw the shadow of the man she had loved. She saw the boy in the market, who had his eyes, and she did not know what to do. The rain fell harder. The Duke did not move, and Catherine closed the door, but she did not lock it. She stood at the door for a long time, listening to the rain, listening to his footsteps, slow, heavy, retreating. She pressed her forehead against the wood, her eyes closed, her breath shallow. William stirred in his sleep. A soft murmur, a turn of his small body. She went to him. She smoothed his dark hair, traced the curve of his cheek. He had the Duke's mouth, the same stubborn set of the jaw, the same way of frowning even in dreams. She had tried so hard to erase the Duke from her life, but she had only succeeded in creating a smaller version of him. The next morning, Catherine woke to find a letter slipped under the door. It was not sealed, it was not addressed, just a single sheet of paper, folded once, written in a hand she recognized too well. She read it standing in the kitchen, the fire crackling behind her, her mother's old kettle whistling. I will be at the old gate at sunset. I will wait until you come. I will wait until the stars burn out if I must. She crumpled the paper, threw it into the fire. She watched it burn. Then she dressed William, packed a small lunch, and told herself she would not go. The old gate was at the edge of the Ashworth estate, where the forest began. It was where they had first met, she a new maid lost in the woods, he the heir to a dukedom, pretending to be a commoner. He had walked her back to the estate, his hand brushing hers, his eyes never leaving her face. She had been 17. He had been 20. They had been fools. Now she was 24, with a son and a scar where her heart used to be. She told herself she was only going to the village to buy bread, but her feet carried her past the bakery, past the market, down the lane that led to the gate. He was there, standing in the same spot where they had first kissed, his hands in his pockets. his gaze fixed on the path she would take. He did not move when he saw her. He did not speak. He waited. She stopped 10 feet away, close enough to see the grey in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly. "You came," he said. His voice was hoarse. "I came to tell you to stop," she said. "Stop writing. Stop waiting. Stop hoping. There is nothing here for you." "I know." He took a step forward. "But there is something here for me. There always has been." She shook her head. "You had your chance. You chose her." "I chose wrong." His voice cracked. "I chose wrong, and I will never make that mistake again." "You say that now," Catherine said. "But you said the same thing 7 years ago. You swore you would never hurt me. You swore I was the only one. And then you stood in a ballroom full of your peers and called me a passing amusement." He flinched. The words hit him like a physical blow. "I know," he repeated. "I know what I said. I know what I did. I know I do not deserve your forgiveness. But I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for a chance to prove that I have changed." She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Change?" she said. "You are a duke. You were born into privilege and power. You have never had to change. You have never had to struggle. You have never had to choose between feeding your son and paying the rent." His face went pale. "Your son." "My son. Your son in blood only," she said. "You have no claim to him. You have no right to him. You gave up that right when you let me walk out of that estate alone." "I will fight for him," the Duke said. "I will fight for both of you. I will tear down every wall, break every tradition, defy every expectation. I will make the world bend to my will, if that is what it takes to have you back." "You cannot bend the world," Catherine said softly. "You cannot undo the past. You cannot give me back the years I lost." "No," he admitted, "but I can give you the rest of my life." She walked away, but that night, lying in her childhood bed, she could not sleep. She stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying every word he had said. She remembered the boy she had loved, the man who had held her in the dark, who had whispered her name like a prayer, who had promised her a future he could not deliver. She remembered the pain, the humiliation, the long, cold years of raising a child alone. But she also remembered the way he had looked at her in the market, the raw, unfiltered grief in his eyes, the way he had fallen to his knees without caring who saw. She rose before dawn. She wrote a letter, short, brutal, honest. "Meet me at the old gate. Bring no servants, bring no titles. Bring only the truth." He was there before her. He stood under the same tree, his hands clasped behind his back, his face unreadable. He wore no fine coat, no sign of his station, just a simple shirt and trousers, like the man she had first met in these woods. "The truth," she said, stopping a few feet away. "Tell me the truth. All of it." He took a breath, let it out slowly. "The night before the engagement ball," he began, "my father summoned me. He was dying. He knew it. I knew it. He made me swear on his deathbed that I would marry Eleanor. He said our family was in debt, much deeper than anyone knew. The Blackwood fortune was the only thing that could save us." She listened. Her face gave nothing away. "He said if I did not marry her, he would destroy you. Not just dismiss you, destroy you. He would have you arrested for theft. He would have you sent to a workhouse. He would make sure no one in the kingdom would ever hire you, shelter you, or speak your name." "He was dying," Catherine said. "He had no power. He had influence. He had allies. And he had a will that would have taken effect the moment he died." The Duke's voice trembled. "I believed him. I was terrified. I thought if I pushed you away, if I made you hate me, you would leave before he could hurt you." She stared at him. "You pushed me away to protect me?" "I pushed you away because I was a coward," he said. "I should have fought him. I should have defied him. I should have chosen you, but I did not. And I have hated myself every day since." A long silence. The wind whispered through the leaves. "You should have told me," she said finally. "I know. You should have trusted me. I know. You should have let me decide what I was willing to endure for you." He lowered his head. "I know." She closed her eyes. The anger was still there, burning beneath the surface. But something else was rising through the cracks. Something she had buried for 7 years. Hope. "I cannot forgive you," she said. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." He nodded. "I understand. But I will let you try." "I know," he said, and the weight of those 2 words, the years of silence they carried, settled between them like a gravestone, finally lifted. If you want to see whether Catherine's hope survives the truth she just heard, subscribe to stay with this story until the very last breath. Tell me in the comments, if you were Catherine, would you let him try, or would you walk away forever? His head snapped up. His eyes searched hers, desperate, disbelieving. "You mean—" "Do not make me repeat it," she said, "and do not make me regret it." The days that followed were careful, fragile, like walking on glass. The Duke visited the cottage every afternoon. He brought gifts, toys for William, books for Catherine, firewood he chopped himself, refusing to let a servant carry it. He stayed for an hour, never longer, never pushing. He told William that he was an old friend of his mother's. He played with him in the garden, taught him how to skip stones, listened to his endless questions with patience Catherine had never seen in him. William adored him. And Catherine watched. She watched the Duke crouch in the mud to show her son how to build a castle out of pebbles. She watched him lift William onto his shoulders so he could see the birds' nests in the high branches. She watched him laugh, truly laugh, for the first time in 7 years. She hated how much it moved her. One evening, after William had fallen asleep, the Duke found her sitting on the cottage steps, staring at the stars. "I never stopped loving you," he said, sitting beside her. "Not for one moment." She did not look at him. "I know." "Then why do you keep me at arm's length?" She turned to face him. Her eyes were wet. "Because I am afraid," she said. "I am afraid to trust you. I am afraid to need you. I am afraid to let you in because if you leave again, I will not survive it." He took her hand. She did not pull away. "I will not leave," he said. "I will never leave. I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you." "You cannot promise that," she whispered. "No one can." "No," he agreed. "But I can promise to try, every day, for as long as you let me." She looked at their hands, intertwined. She looked at the cottage behind her, where her son, their son, slept peacefully. And for the first time in 7 years, she felt something that resembled peace. On the last day of her visit, the Duke asked her to walk with him to the old gate. "I have something to show you," he said. She followed him through the woods, her hand in his. The path was familiar, worn by years of footsteps. They emerged at the gate where a carriage was waiting, but the carriage was not what he wanted her to see. Beyond it, at the edge of the forest, a small stone cottage had been built. It was modest but beautiful, with ivy climbing the walls and wildflowers blooming in the garden. A swing hung from the branch of a nearby oak. "I had it built," the Duke said quietly. "For you, for William. A home that is not an estate, not a cage. A place where you can be free." She stared at the cottage, at the swing, at the garden his own hands had planted. "I will not ask you to marry me," he said. "I will not ask you to come back to the estate. I will not ask you to be my duchess. I will only ask you to let me be part of your life, part of his life, whatever that means, in whatever way you will allow." She turned to him. He was not the Duke of Ashworth. He was not the untouchable aristocrat, the cold-hearted nobleman. He was a man laid bare, offering her everything he had. "One step at a time," she said. "One day at a time." He nodded. "That is all I ask." She took his hand. She led him toward the cottage. And for the first time, when she looked at him, the scars of the past did not bleed. They simply ached, softly, distantly, like a wound that had finally begun to heal. She did not move into the cottage that night. She was not ready. But she let him walk her back to her mother's house, his hand warm around hers, the silence between them filled with something fragile and new. The weeks that followed were a careful dance. The Duke came every day, He brought books for William, stories of adventure and distant lands. He taught the boy to ride, lifting him onto a gentle mare and walking beside them for hours. He learned to cook simple meals in Catherine's kitchen, burning more than he managed to save, making her laugh for the first time in 7 years. That sound, her laugh, stopped him cold every time. He would freeze, a ladle in his hand, his heart splitting open at the seams. She had not laughed since she left. He had forgotten the way it lit up her face, the way it made the world feel less heavy. He began to hope. But hope was a dangerous thing. Catherine knew that better than most. She watched the Duke with William, saw the way her son looked at him with adoration, and felt a cold shiver of fear. William did not know this man was his father. He thought he was a kind stranger, a friend of his mother's. The longer the lie continued, the more it would hurt when the truth came out. She had to tell him. But how do you tell a 6-year-old boy that his father was not a sailor who died at sea, but a duke who had chosen another woman over his own child? She waited until the Duke was gone. She sat William down at the kitchen table, a plate of bread and honey between them, her hands trembling. "William," she began, "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." He looked up at her, his grey eyes, his father's eyes, wide and trusting. "Your father," she said. "He is not dead." William's face stilled. "He is not?" "He is alive, and he loves you. He has always loved you, even though he did not know you." A long pause. "The man who visits," William said slowly. "The tall man, the one with the horses." She nodded. "Yes. He is my father?" "Yes." William was quiet for a long time. Catherine's heart pounded in her chest. She had prepared for tears, for anger, for confusion. What she did not expect was the calm certainty in his voice. "I knew," he said. "I knew he was special. He looks at me the way the other boys' fathers look at them." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I am sorry I lied to you." "It is okay, Mama." His small hand reached across the table and touched hers. "You did what you had to do." She pulled him into her arms, holding him tight, her tears soaking into his hair. She had spent 7 years protecting him, struggling for him, sacrificing everything for him. And in that moment, she realized he had been protecting her too. When the Duke arrived the next day, Catherine met him at the door. "William knows," she said. His face went pale. "Knows what?" "Who you are." He stood frozen, his hand gripping the doorframe. "How did he take it?" "He said he knew. He said you look at him the way fathers look at their sons." The Duke's breath caught. His eyes glistened. "Can I see him?" "He is in the garden. He wants to show you something." They walked together to the back of the cottage, where William was crouched over a patch of soil. He had planted something, a small flower, its petals just beginning to open. "I planted it for you," William said, looking up at the Duke. "Mama said you like flowers." The Duke knelt beside him, his hand hovering over the delicate bloom. "I do, I like them very much." "Will you come every day?" William asked. "Like you do now?" The Duke looked at Catherine. She nodded. "Yes," he said. "I will come every day, for as long as you want me." "Forever?" William asked. The Duke's voice cracked. "Forever." The seasons changed. Summer faded into autumn, the leaves turning gold and crimson, the air growing crisp. The Duke built a fire in the cottage hearth and taught William how to carve wood. Catherine watched from the doorway, a cup of tea warming her hands, her heart slowly, cautiously opening. She had not forgiven him entirely. The scars were still there, deep and raw. But the wound was no longer bleeding. The Duke, for his part, never pushed. He never asked her to come back to the estate. He never demanded a title or a promise. He simply showed up, day after day, week after week. He mended the cottage roof when it leaked. He planted a vegetable garden. He fixed the old fence that had been broken since Catherine's father died. He did not do it to impress her. He did it because it needed to be done, and she needed someone who stayed. One evening, as the first frost settled on the grass, he found her sitting on the steps, wrapped in a shawl, watching the stars. "I spoke to my solicitor today," he said, sitting beside her. She turned to him. About what? About William. He paused. I want to make him my heir. Officially. Legally. He will inherit everything. She stared at him. You do not have to do that. I know I do not have to. I want to. He looked at her, his eyes earnest. He is my son, my only son. Everything I have should be his. You are not doing this to buy my forgiveness, she said. No, I am doing it because it is right. He took her hand. I cannot undo the past, but I can secure his future. And yours. If you let me. She looked down at their joined hands. She thought of William sleeping inside, his small chest rising and falling, his dreams filled with horses and castles, and a father who had finally come home. One step at a time, she said. One day at a time, he agreed. They were married in the spring, not in the grand cathedral where the ton expected to see a duke take his vows, not with hundreds of guests, a choir, and a feast that would be whispered about for generations. They were married at the stone cottage, in the garden he had planted with his own hands, beneath the oak tree where the swing still swayed in the morning breeze. William stood beside them, wearing a small coat the Duke had commissioned from the finest tailor in London. He held a ring on a velvet pillow, his face serious with the importance of his task. The vicar spoke the words. Catherine heard them as if from a great distance, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others. She looked at the Duke, at the man who had broken her and rebuilt her, who had lost her and searched until he found her, who had knelt in the mud and begged for a second chance she never thought she would give. I do, he said. His voice did not waver. She looked at William, at his small, hopeful face, at the future she had not dared to imagine. I do, she said. The Duke kissed her. Not a possessive kiss, not the kiss of a nobleman claiming his prize. A soft kiss, a reverent kiss, the kiss of a man who had been given a gift he did not deserve and would spend the rest of his life protecting. The carriage that took them back to Ashworth Estate was the same carriage she had watched leave without her 7 years before. She pressed her face to the window as the gates opened, as the long driveway unfolded, as the grand house rose into view. The servants were lined up at the entrance. The housekeeper was crying. The butler bowed so deeply Catherine feared he might topple. The Duke helped her down, his hand steady, his eyes never leaving her face. Welcome home, he said. She looked at the house. She looked at the man beside her. She looked at William, running ahead to explore the gardens. She had left this place as a ghost. She returned as its mistress. The ton did not accept her quietly. The first season after their marriage was a battlefield. Lady Eleanor Blackwood had married a minor baron and moved to the countryside, but her mother made sure every drawing-room in London knew the story of the Duke who chose a servant over a marquis's daughter. The whispers followed Catherine everywhere, through ballrooms, through tea-houses, through the opera. She bore them with the same steel she had carried across the country, through 7 years of poverty and solitude. She had survived worse than the sharp tongues of aristocratic women, but the Duke could not bear it. At a dinner party hosted by the Dowager Countess of Whitmore, he overheard a young lord whisper something about the Duke's guttersnipe wife. He set down his glass. He crossed the room. He stood before the man with a look that made the entire table fall silent. "You will apologize to my wife," he said. His voice was quiet. It was more terrifying than any shout. The young lord stammered an apology. Catherine, across the room, watched with an unreadable expression. She did not need him to defend her. She had defended herself for years. But she could not deny that seeing him stand for her, publicly, unflinchingly, stirred something she had buried deep. That night, in their chambers, she found him standing at the window, staring out at the moonlit gardens. "You did not have to do that," she said, closing the door behind her. "I did." He did not turn. "I will do it every time. I will never let anyone speak of you with disrespect." "The whispers do not hurt me. They hurt me." He turned to face her. "Because they are lies. Every word they say about you is a lie. You are not a guttersnipe. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You raised our son alone. You survived what would have destroyed most women. You had every reason to hate me, and you chose to love me instead." She crossed the room and took his face in her hands. "I did not choose to love you," she said. "It was never a choice. It was a sentence." He closed his eyes. "A sentence I will serve for the rest of my life." She kissed him, and for the first time in their marriage, it was not careful. It was not fragile. It was the kiss of two people who had walked through fire and come out whole on the other side. The years that followed were not perfect. They were messy, raw, human. There were arguments, fierce, shouting arguments that made the servants retreat to the farthest corners of the estate. There were nights when Catherine could not sleep, when the old wounds opened and bled, and the Duke held her in the dark, saying nothing, offering only his presence as a balm. There were moments when William asked questions she could not answer. "Why did you not tell me sooner? Why did Papa choose someone else over us?" She learned to answer those questions with honesty, not with protection. She learned that healing meant letting her son see her pain, not hiding it behind a smile. And the Duke learned to be patient, to wait for her to come to him, to accept that the scars would never fully fade, and that he had to love her through them, not ask her to forget. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, the Duke took her to the old cottage in the woods. It had not changed. The ivy still climbed the walls. The wildflowers still bloomed in the garden. The swing still hung from the oak tree, but now a second chair sat beside the first, and inside, on the mantel, was a framed letter, the first letter she had ever written him, the one he had never sent, pulled from the chest where it had lived for 17 years. "You kept it," she said, her fingers tracing the faded ink. "I kept all of them." He opened a small drawer in the desk. Inside, hundreds of letters, all addressed to her, all never sent. "I wrote to you every night for 7 years. I told you everything, what I had done that day, what I remembered about you, what I would do if I ever found you again." She picked one at random, unfolded it. The ink was smudged, the handwriting uneven. "I dreamed of you last night. You were standing in the garden where we first met. You were wearing the blue dress, the one that made your eyes look like the sea. I tried to speak, but the words would not come. You walked away. I woke up screaming." She set the letter down, her hands were shaking. "You kept them all," she whispered. "I kept them because they were all I had of you." He took her hand. "And because I never stopped believing I would find you." She looked at him. The grey in his hair was thicker now. The lines around his eyes were deeper, but the love in his gaze was the same as it had been in the beginning, raw, desperate, absolute. "I am glad you found me," she said. He pulled her close. "I am glad you let me stay." That night they sat on the cottage steps, watching the stars. William was grown now, studying at Oxford, a young man with his father's height and his mother's fire. The estate was thriving. The scandals had faded into memory. Catherine leaned her head on the Duke's shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up everything for me?" He did not hesitate. "I did not give up everything. I gained everything." She smiled. "The Tun would say you lost your reputation." "The Tun can burn." He kissed her temple. "I have you. I have our son. I have a life I never dared to dream of. There is nothing left to regret." A shooting star streaked across the sky. She closed her eyes. She thought of the girl who had pressed her palm against the door of that ballroom, hearing his cruel words, believing her world had ended. She thought of the woman who had walked into the fog, alone and pregnant and terrified. She thought of the mother who had raised a boy with nothing but her will and her love, and she thought of the duchess she had become, not because of a title, not because of a ring, but because she had refused to let the world break her. "Some loves are not chosen," she said softly. "They are recognized. They are fought for. They are earned." He pressed his lips to her hair. "And they are held. For as long as we have breath." They sat in silence, the stars wheeling above them. The night wrapped around them like a promise. She had been a passing amusement. She had become his everything, and she would never be forgotten again. The moon traced silver paths across the grass. Crickets sang their ancient song. The cottage breathed around them like a living thing, walls that held their secrets and their laughter and their arguments and their truces. And in that quiet surrender, in that silent acknowledgement of everything it took to get here, this story becomes more than a romance. It becomes a testament. If you want to witness more tales of women who rise from the ashes of humiliation and forge their own crowns, subscribe to follow this channel. We do not just tell you about love that breaks. We show you love that heals, love that earns its place in the starlight. And before you go, tell us in the comments, what is the one thing you had to fight for alone before anyone believed in you? She closed her eyes and felt the weight of the years. Each one had carved something into her, the 7 years of solitude that had forged her spine into steel. The years of careful rebuilding when every step forward felt like walking on ice. The years of watching her son grow, of watching the Duke become the man he had always been meant to be, of watching love grow back over ground she had thought scorched forever. "You are thinking too much," the Duke said, his voice rumbling through his chest where her head rested. "I'm always thinking too much. That is one of the things I love about you." She opened her eyes, looked up at him. The moonlight caught the silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the softness in his mouth that no one else ever saw. "What else?" she asked. "What else what? What else do you love about me?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he began to speak, his voice low and unhurried, like a man reading from a book he had memorized long ago. "I love the way you walk into a room like you own it. Even when you were a servant, carrying a tray of champagne, you walked like a queen. I love the way you laugh when William tells one of his terrible jokes, the kind of laugh that comes from your whole body, like you forgot to hold anything back. I love the way you argue with me when I am wrong, which is often, and the way you forgive me when I am sorry, which I always am." She felt tears burn behind her eyes. She did not try to stop them. "I love the way you look at the stars," he continued, "like you are reading a story written just for you. I love the way you hold my hand when you think I am not paying attention. I love the way you call me by my name, not my title, even in front of the servants. I love that you never let me forget who I was, but you never stopped believing in who I could become." She turned in his arms, faced him fully. "I love that you searched for me," she whispered, "for 7 years, when anyone else would have given up. I could not give up. Why?" He touched her face. His thumb traced the curve of her cheek, the line of her jaw, the corner of her mouth. "Because you were not a passing amusement," he said. "You were never a passing amusement. You were the first real thing I ever touched, and once I had held you, I could not hold anything else." She kissed him, slow and deep and full of everything she had never been able to say. The years of silence dissolved in that kiss. The years of running, the years of hiding. The years of pretending she did not need him, did not want him, did not still carry the broken pieces of her heart in the shape of his hands. Later, when the fire had burned to embers and the cottage was wrapped in the deep silence of early morning, she lay awake, watching him sleep. His face was relaxed in slumber. The guard he wore through the day, the careful composure, the practiced ease, the weight of a title he had never wanted, had fallen away. He looked younger, softer, like the man she had met in these woods when she was 17 and foolish and full of hope. She touched his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath her palm. She had spent so long afraid that this was a dream, that she would wake up in that attic room clutching her belly, watching her letter burn. That the years of struggle had been the real life, and this impossible, undeserved happiness was the fantasy. But his heart kept beating. His chest kept rising and falling. The warmth of his body seeped into hers. It was real. She did not know what the future held. The world was still the world. There would be challenges, losses, trials she could not yet see. There would be moments when the old wounds ached, when she looked at him and remembered the girl who had heard his cruel words through a crack in the door. But there would also be this quiet, this peace. This certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She pressed her lips to his chest. He stirred, his arm tightening around her, pulling her closer. "I love you," she said, the words barely a breath. "Even in sleep," he responded. "I love you too." She smiled, closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, She fell asleep without fear of what the morning would bring. The day William graduated from Oxford, the Duke stood in the audience with Catherine's hand in his. Their son walked across the stage in his black robe, his head held high, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found them. He smiled. It was the same smile the Duke had worn as a young man, before the weight of the title had pressed it out of him. After the ceremony, William found them in the courtyard. He was taller now, broader, a man in full. But when he hugged Catherine, he was still her little boy, the one she had carried through the fog, the one she had raised by candlelight, the one she had protected with her life. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick, "for everything." Catherine cupped his face. "I would do it all again, every hardship, every tear, every sleepless night, for this moment." The Duke clasped his son's shoulder. "I am proud of you." William looked at him. The old wounds between them had healed, but they had not disappeared. Some scars never do. "I know," William said, "and I am proud to be your son." The Duke's eyes glistened. He pulled William into a fierce embrace. Catherine watched them, her heart so full it ached. The cottage in the woods became a tradition. Every summer they returned. Every summer they sat on the steps and watched the stars. Every summer the Duke showed William how to carve something new, and Catherine made tea from the herbs she had planted in the garden, and they remembered where they had come from. William brought a girl one summer, a quiet, sharp-eyed scholar with a laugh that could fill a room. She was not an aristocrat. She was not wealthy. She was brilliant and fierce, and reminded Catherine of herself at 17. The Duke raised an eyebrow at Catherine. Catherine smiled. "I like her." The Duke sighed. "I suppose I do too." They were married the following spring in the same garden where Catherine and the Duke had exchanged their vows. The same vicar, the same oak tree, the same swing, now painted white and hung with flowers. Catherine held the Duke's hand as they watched their son repeat words she still remembered by heart. For richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others. When the ceremony ended, the Duke pulled her aside. He looked at her with the same intensity he had worn in the market, all those years ago on his knees in the mud. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not closing the door." She thought of that night. The rain, his soaked coat, her hand on the doorframe, frozen between shutting him out and letting him in. "I almost did," she admitted. "I know." He kissed her forehead. "But you did not. And that is the difference between a life of regret and a life of everything." She looked at the garden, at their son and his bride dancing under the fairy lights, at the friends and family who had gathered, who had believed in them, who had watched them fall and rise and fall and rise again. "I never thought I would have this," she said. "Neither did I." She turned to him. "Do you think we deserve it?" He thought about it, weighed the question with the gravity it deserved. "I do not know if we deserve it," he said, "but I know we earned it. Every day, every choice, every time we chose each other instead of the easy path." She nodded. It was enough. It was more than enough. That night, after the last guest had left and the cottage was quiet, they walked to the old gate, the same gate where she had told him to stop writing, to stop hoping, to stop loving her, the same gate where he had waited until the stars burned out. "My mother used to tell me," Catherine said, "that some loves are not meant to be easy. They are meant to change you. They are meant to break you open and remake you into someone who can carry them." She sounds wise. She was. Catherine leaned against the gate. "She also told me to marry someone rich, so she was not always right." The Duke laughed, a full, warm laugh that echoed through the trees. "I love you," he said. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you lost in these woods, trying to find your way back to the estate. You offered to walk me back. I did. You said you were the groundskeeper's son. I lied." She turned to face him. "You were arrogant and handsome and utterly infuriating. I still am." She stepped into his arms. "And I still love you," she said. The stars spun overhead. The night was cool and still. Somewhere in the distance an owl called. She pressed her lips to his. soft, certain, unafraid. And in that kiss was everything. The 17-year-old girl who had fallen in love with a stranger in the woods, the woman who had walked into the fog alone, the mother who had raised a son with nothing but her will, the Duchess who had returned to claim her place. All of her, every piece, every scar, every triumph, and he held her, as he had held her through every storm, every silence, every slow and painful healing. When they finally pulled apart, she looked up at him. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. Promise me you will always find me, even if I get lost again, even if the fog comes back." He touched her face. His thumb traced the same path it had traced 1,000 times. "I will always find you," he said, "even if I have to search for 7 more years, even if I have to tear the world apart, even if I have to wait at this gate until the stars burn out." "I love you," she said. "I love you too," he said. And in the darkness of that perfect night, under the endless sky, with the cottage warm and waiting behind them, they held each other and knew that no love worth having was ever easy. But the ones worth having were the ones worth fighting for, and they had fought, and they had won. And they would spend the rest of their lives proving that some stories do not end with the page. They begin